Hey Student Success, welcome to week 4 of the semester, which means after this week, you are halfway done with this course already since we're only in an 8-week session. So as always, I'll do a quick plug and a quick reminder for your student services assignment. A lot of you have been kind of trickling them in, so I already have like a good handful of you who have already attended a workshop. But remember, your workshop assignment is due by the end of week 8. Over here in My Start State, under your academic support tab, you are going to sign up for whatever workshop that kind of piques your interest. When you sign up, I do not need the confirmation. You are going to send me the completion. So once you're done, you will click in here and you will make sure that you again have registered, but then you'll sign up, get the confirmation, attend the workshop, and then submit in here your actual completion certificate. Okay, so you don't need to send me your confirmation that you signed up for one, just the certificate at the very end showing that you did in fact attend the workshop. So you want to make sure that you finish that assignment and get that out to me. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get into week 4 of the semester. I'm going to scroll down here. So you can see in week 4 you have 3 assignments, a discussion forum. So like always, your discussion forum for attendance purposes, your post is due Wednesday, and then responded to classmates by Sunday. And then you have a chapter 5 assignment and an online learning right for you assignment. So we're talking about the chapters here. There are 3 chapters this week. So I promise I'm going to try to keep it as condensed as possible. Chapter 5 on reading to learn, Chapter 7 on interacting with instructors and classes, and Chapter 8 on writing for classes. So I'm going to come up here, and here is your Chapter 5. As always, I recommend that you take a look through the actual chapter, and there's like the self-assessments and the goal setting for each chapter. But I'm going to use, because we're going through 3 chapters, I'm going to use the slides to really guide my lecture today, and then encourage you to get into the chapters themselves to get more information. So Chapter 5, the key takeaways from this chapter are that you should approach college reading differently than high school reading. Just for lots of purposes. I mean, the difficulty level, the purposes for which you will be reading, and the application that you'll be afterward, in the college setting. So you have to kind of take that personal responsibility. Often in high school classes, you might do a lot of reading together in class with your instructor, where the College Reading Learning Association did a study a few years ago and said that about 85% of what we learn in college is done through what we read. That's a huge percent of what we learn. And it's on our own because we're not always doing that reading in the classroom. Our class is a great example. I go through the lecture, I kind of talk about the key points, and then it's your job to go back into the chapter, and really look at some of these sections in depth and make sure that you are reading to understand those areas. One of the kind of expectations is to spend about 2 or more hours on homework for every hour you spend in class. Now, obviously, that's going to depend on the class. Our class is what's considered a 1-hour contact hour because we're a 1-credit course. And if we were taking this face-to-face, it would equal out to approximately 1 hour in the classroom per week. So it says that you should be spending 2 or more hours on homework in our class because of that. Some weeks, you might need to spend that much time. I mean, possibly depending on what's going on. In an 8-week course, there's always more work going on. In other weeks, you might not need nearly that much time. Now, there are other classes like, let's say, anatomy and physiology, where you're in that class for, 2 hours. So you may have almost 4 hours of work a week to do. And you might need all of that because it's a more in-depth, challenging class. So the key here is just make sure you carve out time for reading for each of your classes. And it is part of the learning cycle, and reading is a process. And so this is something I always hammer with my students in my reading courses, is that we tend to just take for granted. We know that writing is a process. We just accept this fact. We've been taught from a very early age that when we write, we can brainstorm, we draft, we write, we rewrite, we have peer review, and we just know that the first time we write, it's not going to be perfect. It never is for anyone. There is a process to writing. Same thing for reading. You cannot expect to read something every single time, one time through, and like, you got it, you understand it completely. Because reading is a process as well. There are certain things you should do before, during, and after you read to help understand what you read. So I often have students say, oh, I'm not a great reader, I have to reread things. Well, yeah, actually that's what helps make you a better reader. Now, if you're having to reread because you're just glazing over and not paying attention, then yeah, that's not a great thing to have to reread. But if you really are reading and you find yourself not understanding and going back and rereading, that's a quality that a good reader has. That's what good readers do. So in order to be more active in your reading and to view reading as a process, you should be doing these things. You should prepare to read, meaning if you have chapter 2 for class next week, you shouldn't just jump into chapter 2. You should be doing some things before you actually start to read. So you need to make sure that you know why you're reading. What's the purpose? Is it because you have a test coming up and you have to study for it? Do you have to write a paper? Do you have to be prepared to talk about it? If you don't know, if all your teacher said is read this chapter, see you next week, then come up with a purpose. Say, by the end of this, I am going to have 10 vocabulary words, or I'm going to summarize this article. Whatever it might be, come up with your own purpose. Once you get into the pages, do some previewing. Look to see the headings, the subheadings, the diagrams, the boldface words, the italicized words, anything that's going to kind of strike your attention visually, pay attention to that. Look how it's structured. Look to see what might stick out that you already know that you can connect to maybe what you've learned in previous classes. So again, looking to see, can you identify anything familiar or unfamiliar? How can you connect what you're about to read to the course? Or again, as I mentioned, connect to what you may already know about the topic. What is the goal at the end of the reading that you're going to get out of this particular text? So those are all things you should be doing beforehand. You should also be estimating the difficulty level. So I know one thing a lot of us do when we read is we see how many pages it is, which is a common preview strategy. We need to see how long do we have to read. Well, if you're reading something and it's 20 pages, you shouldn't expect to get it done in just 5 or 10 minutes. You should spend more time, so plan more time. So it's going to help with time management. So all of these things, again, you should be doing before you read. It also helps get your mind warmed up for reading. Just like if you were doing a physical activity, you would physically warm up your body. When we prepare to read, we are mentally warming up our proverbial mind juices, if you will. We are getting ourselves ready to read and getting us in the right headspace. And all those little things, like looking to see how many pages, previewing the section headings and the structure and the diagrams, and preparing, our tools to read, all of those things are going to help us in the end with our comprehension. And that's what we want to do. We want to walk away with what we read with the comprehension and understanding. So once we actually start to read, we've already kind of got a feel for the headings, but those can also be used, as it says, as kind of like your roadmap. Your headings can be turned into questions. So you have little sections, turn those little headings into questions. So at the end of each section, you can look and see, did you get the answer to your question? So again, going back and kind of just having that purpose that can help you set a purpose. I'm going to know the answers to all these questions. So this is kind of this slide is tying some of the things I just got done talking about with preparing to read. So after you've done all these things and you kind of know where you want to go with it, you know what you want to get out of it, then you start the actual reading process. While you read, you are going to look for the answers to questions, whether it's the ones that maybe you created from the headings, maybe your instructor gave you a list of questions, maybe the textbook itself has some questions at the end of each section. You're going to look for the answers to those questions. Think about how all these ideas that can relate to one another. Maybe go back over and skim the section. Then when you're done reading each section, and I keep saying section, I know it uses the word in here too, but I'm also going to say, you should be sectioning your reading. If you have even if it's just like a 10-page chapter, you don't want to read all 10 pages in one sitting. Maybe you want to read just a couple pages at a time, take a break, and then another couple pages, because our attention spans don't always hold for very long. Plus, it helps us kind of digest the information a little bit better. You also want to, while you're reading, you don't want to take notes or highlight or underline while you read, because if you've ever, and I know I'm guilty of this, as you read, you have your highlighter out, you highlight, and then you stop and you look and you've highlighted almost the entire page, because as we read, we think everything's important. So what you want to do is read without doing anything, just read. And then at the end of the section, end of the chapter, end of the area that you've kind of blocked off for reading, then go back and highlight, take notes, and underline, because now you have perspective on what was really the important parts of that particular piece of text. So you also, when you're doing that, is you want to be able to get the main ideas. So that is where that note-taking and the highlighting comes in handy. You also want to employ some of those note-taking strategies we talked about in a previous week, Cornell notes or outlines or bullet points or things like that. You also want to make sure you're answering the questions, as well as defining keywords that you find in your reading. So again, these are all things that you should be doing so far before and while you read, and a little bit while you're done reading. Another thing, because I keep mentioning the sectioning, if you have a longer piece to read, let's say 20 pages, but you say, I'm going to stop after every 3 pages and take notes and look at it. That's also so that you don't get to page 20 and realize you've been lost since page 2. If you break it up and okay, every 3 pages I'm going to stop, I'm going to go back and I'm going to take notes, or I'm going to reread the section if it's confusing, or I'm going to look up vocabulary terms, you're checking your comprehension as you go, and you're less likely to be lost further along. And then finally, once you're done doing these things, again, all of this aiding your comprehension, you're going to review. You shouldn't just close up the book and be like, all right, I'm done, check it off my list. You should kind of take some time to really reflect on what you've read. What did I learn? How can I summarize and put this in my own words? Go back to your notes and see if there's anything that you missed or you need to plug in a little bit. Connect it to what's going on in your class. Talk to other people if you need to, or if you're able to. Revisit any notes from a lecture that you took, or when you go to lecture, connect what the teacher says to what you took notes on your own. So there are things you should review and spend time with, because the more we review and look at information after we've visited the first time, again, you're enhancing your likelihood of comprehension. Okay? Now, all of this will obviously add time onto your reading. So that's why you want to make sure that you're planning enough time to read. Reading, again, is a process. And so whenever you take these extra steps, yes, you're adding time, but it's time that's invested into the reading process, so that hopefully a week later, when you have a quiz over that material, you're not having to reread 20 pages again. You might just have to go back and look at your notes or just skim over, because you already invested so much time the first time you went through and read it. Okay, so as I said, that's chapter 5, and I encourage you, again, to go in to the actual chapter and really look at it, especially if maybe reading was something that you struggled with, or maybe that you just don't invest the time necessary into reading to make it worthwhile, or you're not getting what you need to out of it. We also have reading classes on campus. If you think taking a reading class would be beneficial to you in your college studies, you can reach out to me and let me know. I can give you more information, but also just take a look more in our text. This one talks specifically, I think this is a neat part of it. If you have specific subject areas and you struggle with specific subject area reading, this goes over what if you're in a math class? How do you approach math class reading? Because it's going to be different than science type text text that you read. So that's interesting to me. And then this is also building vocabulary. The larger vocabulary you have, the easier it is for you to read and understand, which makes sense. If you're not having to stop and look up words constantly, it's going to make your comprehension a little bit more smooth. But there are ways to build vocabulary. Look for new words, keep a vocabulary journal, practice things. I like this site. I don't know if anyone's ever been here before. freerice.com. Okay, I don't really want to do that, but whatever. So you can look and see. This is a really cool vocabulary site. It started off as vocabulary. There's actually other subjects in here as well. But if you ever have a couple minutes in between classes, it starts really simple, you can see, and then it goes up to level 60. It gets really challenging. But every time you get a correct answer, it donates a grain of rice to an area of the world. This is for the World Food Program. They help donate food to places in the world who might need food. And so you're kind of doing double duty. You're building vocabulary, but you're also doing a nice thing for this program. So that's Free Rice. And again, these vocabulary words in the middle, mall means shopping center. I just donated some rice. And it gets more difficult as you go. Vocabulary words on flashcards or vocabulary journal. Again, all these different ways to build new vocabulary. I really encourage vocabulary journals when you get into your content area, because as you get more in your field, you're going to come across and use certain vocabulary over and over. So it's helpful to kind of have a vocabulary journal. But here are different suggestions on how to build vocabulary as well. Okay, that is chapter 5. As I said, we have a couple chapters, so we're also going to look at chapter 7. So I have chapter 7 pulled up here as well. Chapter 7, this is interacting with instructors and classes. This is where you could go. After I'm done, look through here, take your self-assessment, look at kind of goals. I'm going to go through the slideshow to get kind of the gist out of it. So you want to make sure that you are understanding kind of, again, that difference between high school and college and just the expectations that certain instructors may have for you. So you have a lot of responsibility, self-learning, self-responsibility in college, especially online courses. I mean, you are really responsible and have to be self-motivated for these online classes. And so this section talks about some of those expectations and why would you attend class. This is part of chapter 7. The importance of the importance of attending class. Hopefully you already know this, but this is some of what chapter 7 discusses. Obviously you don't go to class, you miss information. Sometimes you will never hear that information again, but it might appear on a test. Your final grade does incorporate kind of your attendance, your participation, your engagement, and there is a higher correlation of success to those who attend class. And you're paying to go to class. I mean, kind of at the very beginning, you paid to go to class, so attend class. Again, some of these are really this common sense type stuff, but chapter 7 likes to kind of just plug that hard. If you do have to miss a class, especially we know during the age of COVID, you want to touch base with your instructor, send an email, voicemail, whatever the case might be, check over your syllabus, hopefully check in with maybe a classmate or a friend to see if you can look at their notes or just kind of get some information on what you might have done in class, visit your instructor in their office hours, all of those kinds of things. Participating in class is important. So participation looks different for every student. And I, as an instructor, and most instructors know that, participation is not always like, let me raise my hand and answer every question or ask every question. It also can be your body language. It can be what you say after class. It can be what you email. So there's lots of different ways people can participate. It's also your note taking. It's also kind of making sure that you are showing eye contact and nodding and communicating. So those are all different ways to participate in class. The key is finding your participation style and then also just making your instructor know that you are engaged and paying attention and are learning, and you're not just, this is kind of like a phrase, not just your butt in the seat, but your mind's in the seat, right? You want to make sure that you are communicating and showing your instructor that you are there. Asking questions is an important part of participating, but it's also just an important part of the learning process in general. So, again, not everyone's comfortable right away asking questions in class. I always tell my students, hey, if you don't want to ask me a question in class because you're a little self-conscious or you're just a little shy at first, send me an email, send me a text. Stay after, ask me, when no one else is around. And then hopefully eventually you'll feel a little bit more comfortable asking in class. But just remember that most of the time, if you have a question, so does someone else in the class. They also have that question. And again, you're paying to be here. Get everything you can out of it. Ask all the questions, okay? So that's just a reminder about the importance of asking questions. Communicating with instructors beyond what's in class. Make sure that you maybe use their office hours. Try to kind of just be professional, communicate well. I will also just kind of as a quick thing, if you're emailing your instructors, you cannot always assume they're going to know who you are right away. This happens to me a lot. I have between online and face-to-face, I have around 200 students, especially at the beginning of the semester. It's hard for me to sort through who is from what class. So it's really helpful if a student says, hey, this is Linda from your Monday, Wednesday critical analysis class. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, yep, I can see that student. Or, this is Linda from your SSC101 online class. And that way I'm not trying to picture someone's face because I don't know them yet. But it lets me know, you're in my online class. That's a really simple thing you can do, especially at the beginning of the semester, to make sure an instructor knows who you are if you're communicating online. You just want to make sure that you're communicating professionally, both in person and online. There's a little bit of in chapter 7 about anxiety, and that's normal, especially at the beginning of a semester. And so you want to make sure that if you have to speak in some capacity, maybe just practice it. I know this is talking about like a formal presentation, but sometimes even just practicing a question you want to ask, if you're going to ask it ahead of time, that can help a little bit. And as time goes on, hopefully a little bit of that self-confidence will develop. And then chapter 7 talks again a little bit about like presenting in that formal fashion, making sure that you're preparing and practicing and researching your presentation. So that's chapter 7. Again, it goes through all of these different things. Attending classes, the importance of attending classes, what to do when you miss a class, participating in class and the importance of participation and what participation looks like for different students and in different contexts, lecture class versus a lab versus an online class, and knowing that everyone has their own learning style, like that VARC that I mentioned would be a good idea for some of you to take. All teachers have their own teaching style as well. So it's also important to know that sometimes you might have to adapt a little bit based on individual subject areas and teaching styles. So this goes into communication with instructors, and then this last part about presentations. So public speaking and class presentations, this is the part that a lot of you might need to pay attention to, because at some point you're probably going to have formal presentations you're going to give. So just making sure that you're aware of that and looking at these presentation anxiety tips. And I think this goes into nice detail. All right, so that is chapter 7. The very last chapter is chapter 9. Chapter 8. There is not a PDF to go along with it, just the textbook itself, but this talks about the writing process. And so again, a self-assessment, some where you want to be, some goals, and the importance of writing. So a lot of reading and writing is really connected. The more you write, the better your writing becomes, but also your reading, and vice versa, because there are so many connections between reading and writing. So this section will talk about, just like our other one did, like what's different about college reading. This one talks about what's different about college writing. So the writing environment, the differences between high school and college. You will find yourself probably writing a lot more research pieces as well as informed persuasive pieces. And so that's why this section here talks about, what kinds of papers. So this goes into like the action verbs, the things you have to summarize, you're going to have to argue, you're going to have to analyze. So you want to make sure you know what those verbs mean and what that looks like. You're also going to have to really make sure that you understand how to cite and how to look at rubrics to know what you're supposed to be doing. So this kind of talks about, again, like look at the focus, look at the scope, understanding what the instructor is wanting from you. How can you become a better writer? Well, most of you will be taking a writing course, intro to academic writing, college composition. And so that right there is going to obviously make you a little bit of a better writer, but then also, asking questions, knowing your expectations. This goes through in different ways to make sure you're setting that up. I apologize, my computer screen keeps going in and out here. This gives just so many tips. Editing, transitions, the writing process. So if writing is an area that you feel a little less confident in, I really encourage you to spend time looking at this section in particular. This goes over revising and editing. So there's a difference. When you revise, you're looking at the big picture, organization, flow, making sure your thesis and your structure, the rest of it supports your thesis, versus editing is kind of the nitty gritty, is looking at your grammar and punctuation and spelling. What do you do if you need help with writing? Well, in our college here, if you go to info for current students, I'll show you real quickly. We have a writing center here on campus. If you don't want to make an actual appointment, you can click on the Writing Center resources, and there are just lots of tabs to tell you all about the Writing Center. Okay? It has their schedule. You can click along here, and it's going to, again, kind of give you like a who they are, how to make an appointment, resources. If you don't want to make an appointment, you just want like a quick reference guide, you You can look all through here. They have some really great, and they updated this over the summer. They updated all of these tabs here, so it looks really nice. So again, if you're not looking to like necessarily make an appointment, there's lots of resources here. But there's also an actual physical writing center here on main campus, on Stark State campus, and then online. There's an online writing center that you can sign up for and do appointments online. It's especially helpful for students who take online classes, or maybe you just can't get to campus in between classes or whatever it might be. The online writing center could be a great place for you. Okay. And then the next section talks about other kinds of writing, because even if you're not in a writing class, odds are you're going to be doing some kind of writing inside your courses. So this talks about different kinds of, maybe you have different reports or scenarios or things you have to do in each of your classes that you have to incorporate some writing. So this talks about a little bit of those. All right, so those are the materials. And again, as always, I encourage you to spend some time inside each of those chapters and really take a look, especially at the areas that you might need some brushing up on. So let's talk about your assignments for this week. You have a discussion forum, Chapter 8 discussion forum. Original response due Wednesday for week 4 attendance, and then by Sunday respond to 2 classmates. This should look familiar because this is just like what you've done in previous weeks. You'll see this, there's a table of 4 topics. You're going to do all 4. Okay, so I know in the past there's been like 9 and you choose 4, but right now there's just 4. So you're going to write on all 4, and you can see this is Chapter 8, the writing chapter. So you're going to look at each of these areas of the writing process: past writing, sentence level mechanics, writing process itself, and seeking help, and fill in both statements. So again, all 4, you are completing both statements in each category. That's your discussion forum for this week. There's always that little example and how to do that. And again, make sure you're responding to 2 classmates. Okay, then you have a Chapter 5 assignment. So Chapter 5, here's the actual assignment right here. It's going to open up into a Word document. And again, this should look familiar because we've done this in previous weeks as well. Chapter 5 was the reading chapter. So this all has to do with something to do with reading. So areas of reading: reading comprehension, reading speed, reading vocabulary. So what can you do to improve your reading understanding? 2 things. What 2 things can you do to improve your reading speed? What 2 things can you do to improve your reading vocabulary? Again, if you're like, oh shoot, I already forget, go back to your materials folder, pull up the PowerPoint for Chapter 5 or the chapter link for Chapter 5. When are you going to take this action? The next time you're in class, the next time you read. How will you know it's accomplished? How do you know your comprehension has improved? How do you know your reading speed has improved? How do you know your vocabulary is improved? Okay. So make sure you give me some details on it, not just like 1 or 2 words. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to try to improve these 3 areas? Make sure you save that and put it in the Dropbox right here. That's due by Sunday. Okay. All right, and then the very last thing you are doing connects to Chapter 7. As I said, there's 3 chapters this week. This one is online learning right for you. So you're actually going to take a short survey, and you can see the survey is hyperlinked right here. You're going to click on that. It's going to take you to this web survey right here. You're going to go through this series of questions, click what connects to you, hit submit. You're going to get some results. I am not going to see your actual survey right here. What you are going to do then says, after you take the survey, submit your score under Write Submission and comment whether you believe online learning is right for you and why. So you're going to click in here, and in the Write Submission part, I'm going to say my score was whatever it was, and I agree or disagree because. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. So it's going to give you a score on how well you're suited for online learning, and you're just going to tell me if you agree or disagree and why. Okay, so really this one is usually a paragraph or less. So what your score was and if you agree or disagree. Again, I will not see your actual survey. You're just going to tell me your results inside the submission area. All right, so as a quick recap for week 4, you are reading Chapter 8, Chapter 7, and Chapter 5, looking at the materials, looking at the PowerPoints, watching the video, in the actual text itself. And then you are completing your Chapter 8 discussion form, original response by Wednesday for week 4 attendance, responded to classmates by Sunday, your Chapter 5 assignment, which is that Word document down here, and your online learning right for you. You take the survey and then tell me what you got and how you feel about it in the submission area. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a great week 4. Bye.